Welcome to the show on a Tuesday morning. I am so pleased that my guest today is Melanie Murrin with Safe Community Wood Buffalo. I mean, she was planning to be here anyway, but the timing of her visit could not be any better. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you.
Melanie is, let me see if I get this right. I practiced all night long.
Okay.
Impact Youth Coordinator.
There you go. You got it.
What does that mean? What do you do?
So I'm responsible for educating youth in our community on things that impact them in their daily lives, whether it's things from their education to getting their driver's license to making smarter choices when it comes to drugs and alcohol and even peer pressures.
Wow, so your scope is wide.
Pretty wide, but our big focus is on road safety.
Okay, well, and that is the topic of the week. There's no question about it. After the Humboldt Broncos tragedy, everybody's wondering how it happened, why it happened, and what happened when the first responders got there. I'm a kind of a radio addict. I listen to another radio station called CBC for hours at a time, and I've kind of like after the fire, I couldn't get enough information.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are talking about it right now. And there was one lady who was saying that ever since the accident, she's changed her driving because she no longer listens to the radio because she realized how much of a distraction it was.
Right.
And she's become way more mindful, I guess is a great word.
Yeah.
So as you were watching that news, how do you react as a person that works in this field when something like that happens?
Well, I mean, of course, the first thing that kind of goes through your mind is what happened in that situation. Why did that collision occur? And it's, until, until the investigations are all done and complete, no one really knows the real reason of what happened. But you really have to start to wonder, like, what was going on? Why aren't people more focused? And whether it's driver inattentiveness or road conditions, we just want to think that we're all safe, and we all have the same impression that it's not going to happen to us. It's whether you're the one behind the wheel or you're the passenger or the person walking or anything, we all think that we're safe and that we're doing the best and being the most responsible that we can be. It's slight mistakes sometimes,
Yeah.
So
in your work with the Road Safety Committee, which has a different name now, we'll get to that in a minute,
yeah.
And trying to impart wisdom and ideas into the minds of young people so that they can use those, leverage them through their lives as adults that are on our roads. Are there a couple of key things that work the best in trying to get the message to young people?
Unfortunately, yeah, sometimes. Some of the things that we've learned throughout the years, and it's not what we want to continue doing, is everybody always thought the scare tactics were really sort of the best way. And it was, showing everybody the most graphic things possible of that this can happen to you sort of thing. And not only can that be traumatizing and affect the way that you're going to see things going forward, but we don't want to startle people. We want them to see that this is still a privilege and it's still a right for them to be able to be a driver and to be more responsible in making their proper choices. But now it's more about changing behaviors. Right? We don't want to scare the crap out of people anymore. And especially when you consider situations like what happened over the weekend with these young kids, we don't want to be showcasing that to people. That's somebody's life. That's someone's family, and we shouldn't be using that to our advantage to educate others so much as we should be saying, if we change our behaviors, these types of things can be avoided. And that's a huge difference.
In a way, it's the difference between, let's say, use littering as an example.
Yeah.
You can go after littering and say, if you are caught littering, you get $1 million fine, or we're going to strive to be a litter-free community by 2020.
Yeah.
There's two different approaches, and my sense from our conversation before we went on the air is you're more inclined to do the second approach.
Oh, very much.
Talk about that and the goal that you guys have as a committee.
So we've changed from being our road safety committee to a Vision Zero advocate group. So Vision Zero is something that was actually started in the Netherlands years and years ago, and Sweden has taken it on, and between Sweden and the Netherlands, they've actually managed to surpass all of us. So Vision Zero is the goal of having zero serious injuries and zero fatalities on our roadways. Excuse me. And in saying that, Sweden has managed to successfully reach that goal and achieve it and maintain it for the last 2 years. They have no serious injuries and no fatalities on their roadways as a result of just changing driver behavior, changing infrastructure, and the education to the members of their community. And that's sort of what our plan is to do here in Fort McMurray and throughout our municipality. So we've set a few goals that we want to reach, and Vision Zero is a goal that we want to have by 2030. So we've got a few short-term goals along the way to help us get there.
About 10 years ago, when Highway 63 had a very different brand than it has today,
Yeah.
we would hear stories of people going extraordinary speeds, taking extraordinary risks every single day. In your view, has that changed since the twinning has been completed?
In some ways, I think that it has. We still see some great speeds because it's been twinned. And I know there was a lot of controversy around that. A lot of people were always saying that, it's going to become like the next Autobahn and it's going to be the Autobahn of Alberta, which it's not. And I think a lot of people still haven't realized that. And because of the presence of our enforcement that we have out on the roads now compared to even though we had it there before, I think it's made a big difference. And people, I find the average, they're still kind of really only going that 5 to 10 kilometers over. At least that's what I see when I'm traveling. And that's a bit more comforting to me, knowing that, you've got that extra bit of leeway now that you're not so inclined to be in a head-on collision, yet people have still slowed down.
Yeah.
And I think that's impressive. I think it's great. So,
are you working with kids before they get their license, during the process of getting their license, or after they're driving, or a little bit of all of that?
It's a little bit of all of it. We start with teenagers who are between the ages of about 13 and 14. So right around the time when they get to go for their learner's permit. So we're helping them gain that extra bit of knowledge and education and making sure that they're aware of the fact that, you're not just driving a car, you're operating a piece of equipment that is like 5, 6, 7,000 pounds. And that's the force that you're operating in. And sometimes they don't really think about that. So we want to start at the beginning and get them nice and early so that we remind them all the time, we're educating them. We're not harping on them. We're not yelling at them or telling them what not to do and what to do. It's so much as this is what's going to keep you safe.
Of course, because I have a son that's in the process of getting his learner's permit, they have to do a written kind of exam first. And as we were driving somewhere, he was studying, and then he'd run up against the question that he didn't understand, and he'd speak it aloud. And of course, my wife and I would go, I have no idea. So I'm wondering, how do we keep education going, even with adults? I mean, because quite frankly, whatever we learned in high school, so much of it we've lost. Yeah. So how do we promote that, in your view, for people that have their license for 20, 30 years?
Well, that's always a good question that we always come across. It's, I've had my license since I was 16, 17 years old, and I kind of wonder sometimes, my son is now 15, and he goes, well, what do you do when you get in this situation? I'm going, okay, hang on. We go and we look it up together. Yeah. And that's really the only way, is you have to continue to push yourself to educate. Not only your children and the youth in our community, but you have to educate yourself all the time, because things are constantly changing. And I'll never forget going online when my nephew was going to get his license, and he was saying, the test is really hard. And I thought, I don't remember it being that hard. We all think back and go, oh, but it wasn't that difficult. It's not really that hard. We sat down and we went online and we did the practice exams, and we were all doing the exams like 2 and 3 times before we could pass. And we thought, okay, yeah, it's time for us to stop and re-educate ourselves as well, because clearly we don't remember exactly what it takes to necessarily get into those situations and go, who has the right of way, or your stopping distance. Oh my goodness, that's always a fun one. So
there's so many situations in town where we've developed a practice, and I even one for me was driving down Franklin, taking a right to go to Mac Island. Yeah. I remember having a debate, I think, with Gail.
Oh, okay.
Not a debate, but I was doing a particular thing thinking it was absolutely the correct way, and I think she corrected me. So I guess my question is, I know your focus is on youth, but how is your committee going to approach getting dialogue going with just the broader community about these things that we do every day that maybe we're doing wrong and we don't even realize it?
Yeah, and we're trying to find different ways to, I don't want to say commercialize it, but just that advertisement of reminding people about how much, it's little things and bad habits that we get involved in, and how to break those bad habits and stay with it. So of course there's advertising that lies behind everything. Yeah. And I really don't like it, because advertising seems to be a way to target everybody these days. But there has to be a way to get that message out there. And whether it's, we find a way for people to start retraining through driver training somehow, and you can't force people to go back and do that, right? And most people are going to say, oh, I got my license years ago, but I know what I'm doing, so I don't need to do that anymore.
It's far better to inspire them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is your vision approach.
So that's our plan, yeah.
A quick question before we go to break. In your view, it doesn't have to be factual, but in your sense, what's the worst bad habit that people have?
Oh, texting and driving.
You're not supposed to text and drive?
No. It is the worst habit I've ever seen. And I tell everybody all the time, pull up to a red light, pull up to a stop sign. I don't care if you're driving or walking. Look around at every vehicle around you. You will see at least one person doing it all the time.
I remember when I was on council asking our former fire chief a question. I said, okay, I'm at a stop sign. The vehicle is not moving. The light is red. And I want to take a picture of the sunset. Can I do that? And he said, no. No. And I went, really? And he said, no, absolutely.
Your vehicle's still in drive. I learned that the hard way, actually. I was doing it in a drive-thru.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Didn't even realize it. I was in drive-thru. I thought, okay, I'm stopped. I'm not moving anywhere. I grabbed my phone. And of all people, I text Gail, my boss. And I said, hey, I'm in this drive-thru. What do you want for coffee? And she's, you're in drive-thru. I'm not answering you. And I couldn't figure out why. And then she's like, your vehicle's not in park.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. One of the best tools, frankly, I don't know when it came out, but on my phone it has the thing that detects when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And it shuts off. And you know what? I just went on a trip to Calgary and I didn't look at my phone once.
That's awesome.
I should get 10 points for that.
Yes. 10 bonus points for you, Russell. Good job.
Our topic today is road safety. It is on every Canadian's mind this week because of the horrible events that happened near Tisdale and Saskatchewan with the Humboldt Broncos. We're going to continue our conversation with Melanie Murrin. She's the Impact Youth Coordinator with Safe Community with Buffalo. And you're listening to Impact. It is a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, YMM Magazine, and 91.1 The Bridge. Good morning. Welcome back to the show. April the 10th, and still no sign of spring. Maybe a couple of days from now. Actually, it's been above zero a little bit the last couple of days. Really hopeful we'll see some grass, the good kind of grass.
I'd say the green grass. I guess it doesn't help.
In the next few days. My guest this morning is Melanie Murrin, who is the Impact Youth Coordinator with Safe Community with Buffalo. We're talking about road safety, and I love the vision of zero fatalities and serious injuries by what year was it that you're shooting towards?
We're shooting towards 2030.
2030, and I know it's hard because all of us know people. I'm a very conservative driver. I can speak that proudly, but a lot of people are not. A lot of people are very aggressive.
True.
And they feel like they're, what's that word when you can't get hurt? Impervious?
Invincible?
Invincible, yeah. So the question that you asked off the air is, well, how do we, as a committee, begin to inspire even the adults to change their behavior? And I guess that's the task of your committee. And I think that leads, who is your committee? Who are they?
Well, we have been working with, we've got RCMP, bylaw, we've got, now that we're starting on more with our Vision Zero plan, we've been working with the public and Catholic school boards as well, because we want to make some changes with the school zones. We want to see them become more uniform throughout the entire city, which is really going to help change a lot of things. We've got some members from transportation within the municipality that have joined us as well, and a few councillors, which is really helping sort of push and drive things forward for us a bit better.
Yeah. Melanie, you know about this issue very personally because you were in a collision, sorry.
A collision, yes, not an accident.
Trained me well. A collision at some point about a decade ago. What happened in your situation?
For me, I was actually stopped at a red light. I was on Highway 63 coming into town.
Yeah.
And I, with my terrible luck that I seem to continue with some days, was stopped behind a gravel truck. And I was in a small car. It was actually, thankfully, a courtesy vehicle. And then I had another gravel truck come up behind me, and it was an impaired driver, and he didn't stop. So he claimed he didn't see me. And not only did he run into the back of the car, pushing me forward into the gravel truck, it actually pushed my car underneath the gravel truck that was ahead of me as well. So I kind of went accordion style and then sandwiched underneath it as well at the same time. So,
Oh my goodness. Now, were you aware of what happened when it happened, or was it something that you sort of recalled after?
I know I got hit. I remember getting hit, the initial impact, and then I don't really remember much else except for when I woke up in the hospital 10 days later. So
your injuries were incredibly serious.
yes, yeah. I was brought to the hospital. They induced me into a coma on site because they didn't think that I was going to survive. So instantly they just put me right out, and they brought me to the hospital here. I stayed in the ICU for 3 days, I believe, and then I was finally medevac to the U of A and was out there for about a month before I was able to come back home. And my first initial surgery took 12 and a half hours to reconstruct just my face.
Wow.
So
you can empathize in a way that many of us probably can't with what happened with those young boys.
for those who are suffering from the injuries and those who are still striving to get better and heal from everything physically as well as mentally, I'm able to empathize with that. For those who have sadly lost their loved ones, we do the best that we can to sympathize with it, but I don't have that same emotional connection that many others would have as those who have already lost someone as a result. So,
how are you now with driving?
Now I do significantly better. I won't lie, I still definitely have my panic attacks if I'm stuck between big vehicles, even buses, anything large that I go, oh, that can squish me. Sometimes I still hesitate, but I've also learned to kind of stop in the moment, and I've had to pull over plenty of times and just wait, and the moment will pass, the vehicles will pass, and then I'm okay, and I go back out there.
I think for the vast majority of us, we hear about situations like yours or what had happened a few days ago, and most of us can't even comprehend the realities of what actually has happened and what these first responders are facing. And I say that because of yesterday's news that they actually had the identities of two of the kids wrong.
Yes.
And you're kind of going, well, how is that possible? But then you stop, you reflect, and you realize the trauma, that was a word that was used many times, the trauma that they went through was insane.
Yeah.
And it is understandable but of course for most of us, we have no real idea of that. And so I know one of the things that you and your group have done over the many years is try to make that a little bit more real for young people through the thing. What do you call it when you do the simulation?
When we have our mock collision, we do a party program for grade 9s here in town every year, and that's the acronym PARTY. It stands for prevent. I have to stop and think about it sometimes. It's prevent alcohol and risk-related trauma in youth. So we start the mornings with a mock collision where we've got a ton of volunteers that come out and help us, and so many other organizations here in town as well. Like, for example, I have to mention that Bishop's Towing and Salvage, because they have been phenomenal with helping us do the program each year. But we do this mock collision so that we bring these kids out to the parking lot, and we've got a simulation of a collision that's already taken place. But we've got volunteer actors who are inside the vehicles, and they've been prepped and trained for everything. And some of them, it's a fatality, and for some, it's not a fatality, but serious injuries, who, our actor later succumbs to those injuries, sadly. But it's making that a reality for our youth so that they see firsthand, this is what really happens. And for our emergency services department. These guys are absolutely phenomenal. They work so hard, and they do a live extraction of our victim who is trapped inside the vehicle. So our youth are actually seeing what happens on scene in the situation of a real collision. So it tends to be quite graphic for many of them, but it's also, sped up, and our guys are rehearsed and well practiced in this, and we remind them it's solely for training purposes. However, this is real life. And this is what can potentially happen if you're not careful.
Even though it's a simulation, how have you seen and observed young people responding, even just to the simulation? How do they respond?
Goodness, we have had so many different responses. I mean, we have some youth who, and I don't blame them. We have some that laugh, just because they don't know how to deal with it, and so they kind of giggle to laugh it off, don't know how to accept it. We have a lot of students who will have to walk away. They have to step aside. They're crying in tears. We've had students who vomit, which is rather unfortunate for everybody around that student. And we have had some students who have passed out. So we definitely have a lot of services there to support all of these kids, because we generally see about 100 kids a day.
Yeah. It's disturbing, and apologize if you're listening and getting disturbed by the conversation, but it is real, and it happened to a lot of people on that bus the other day. And I've been listening to interviews with first responders. In fact, one of the fire chiefs that was first on the scene, and he was describing sort of what he goes through. They're trained. They're trained to deal with it.
Yeah.
And they do. And they just sort of get systematic in helping those that they can, and doing the best they can under extremely perilous circumstances. And he kind of described that he was emotionally intact through it all.
Yeah.
But then you go away from it, and inevitably it hits you. I can't imagine the first responders of this particular one. There were so many. There were fire department. There was 50 police officers on the scene. Do you have any sense of what do they say about those kind of experiences for them?
That's kind of the advantage to having these guys take part in the program with us. For what they try to express to the kids, it's, when you're in the moment, you just have to be in the moment. And it sucks, and it's unfortunate, and they just go, I just got to get my job done. My job is to be here and save this person's life and do the best that I can. And that's what they're there for. And then I know that when they walk away, I mean, none of us can possibly imagine what they have to go through and how they deal with it. But I know at the end of every collision, at the end of every scene, they all do have to sit and go through a debrief, which I think is the greatest thing ever, because you need that group support, right? You've got, 10, 15, 20 people all working on the same scene, but you've all seen something different.
Yeah.
And you all have to find a way to cope with that. And for some, sure, it's easier than it is for others, but everybody's going to handle it in a different way. And I praise these guys to the high heavens, because without them, I wouldn't be sitting here either. So
amazing. Yeah, amazing. And I know that with the Humboldt situation, it was so bad, even bystanders were called into service.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, they said there was 15 to 20 of them, and they were like runners. If they needed a blanket, you go get this, go get that. And anyway, it's a tragic story. It's a great topic of conversation today, road safety and the vision. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great by 2030, even before that, if we actually get to a place where we have zero major accidents and fatalities in our
collisions.
Collisions. Zero collisions.
Zero collisions.
Did I say accidents?
You did.
I didn't even realize I said accidents. Apparently, you're supposed to say collisions, because it's oftentimes. What do you call? Okay, this is a fair question before we go to break. What if there is no other vehicle and somebody flips? Is that still a collision?
It's still a collision. Yeah.
Okay then.
It's still a single vehicle collision.
Matt didn't know that. He was looking really puzzled over
there. The reason why we choose not to use the word accident is because a collision can be 100% avoidable.
Absolutely.
It's all a matter of error on some level.
Absolutely. Melanie Murrin is our guest. She is the Impact Youth Coordinator with Safe Communities Wood Buffalo, doing a great job trying to make our roadways safer in our region, and they've been doing it for a very long time. You're listening to Impact on a Tuesday morning. We'll be back with more right after this. Good morning and welcome back to the show. Melanie Murrin is our guest from Safe Communities, Wood Buffalo, a group of amazing people who work out of the Red Pole Center promoting safety of all kinds in the region. Melanie's focus is youth.
Yeah.
And as you look ahead to the rest of the year, are there major activities that you have coming up, getting in front of youth and working with them? Or when is your crazy busy time?
Right now is our crazy busy time. Wow. We're just getting started, yeah. So leading up into the spring, it's always a busy time for us. So, for example, party program. It's a 7-day program that we're going to be starting in May. Usually we do it in April, but we pushed for May this year. Thankfully, it's going to help us a little bit better with the weather, so we're a little excited for that. But yeah, I'll just give a little shout out there. If anyone wants to come and volunteer, feel free to connect with me because I definitely need some more volunteers.
Is the party program for a particular age group?
We do it for grade 9s every year. Yeah.
Oh, so you start them really early. Grade 9. That's grade 9. My son's in grade 9.
Oh, fantastic!
Apparently. I had to really think about that.
So then he's going to come through the program with us this year.
Well, he would, and he's doing that thing where he's trying to get his learner license. So he's right in your target demo. So another safety issue. I know it's not road safety, but in some ways it is. We have spring breakup coming up right away, and one of the things they say all the time is don't stop your car to watch the river break.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big one. And don't park too close to the river because who knows what could happen this year. Yeah, and every year, of course, being in Fort McMurray and many other communities as well, we have to watch for flooding. So, that's definitely a good sign of keeping people away from the river a little bit more would be very helpful. And don't drive your truck across the river at this time of year because guess what? You might sink. Yeah, the ice just is really not thick enough for you to be out there right now. Yeah. It's an exciting time of year. I hope nothing happens, although to be honest, because I live in a floodplain, I am a little concerned because of the late spring and the long winter. Your committee, broad range of participants that are working with you to begin to cast the vision of being at a place where we have zero major collisions and that kind of thing by 2030. Yeah. What are your steps? Like right now, are you just in the formative stage? What do you roll out a plan, or is that all part of the process that you guys are going through right now? So we do have to kind of, roll out a plan. We have to have some points that we want to, mini goals that we want to reach in order to be able to get to our main goal, of course. So 2030, it's 12 years away. Some people will say, that's a really long time. Others say it's not long enough, or that it's not achievable for us to reach that. But knowing that in other places they have achieved it. So we're starting small and learning from things that they've already done. So we're starting with our school zones and playground areas. So by 2020, only giving us really a year and a half, 2 years left, we want to see uniform school zones here. And by saying that, I don't mean uniform as in, kids wearing uniforms, so much as the school zones themselves, where we want all school zones are going to be marked as 30. Yeah. And that's going to include our high schools as well. We want to have all of them zoned for a 30 zone just to be able to keep everyone safe, because even though, we've got teenagers going to the high school and, they're a bit more aware and alert of things, but it's still just that minor mishap that can take place, and we want to try and avoid it and keep them safe as much as possible. So we're hoping to reach that goal by 2020. And then we've got some other goals by 2025 that we want to be able to reach as well, in the hopes of we're going to do some monitoring of high collision areas in town and congested intersections as well, just to try and find out what the problems are and how we can change those problems as well. I apologize for looking at my phone, but there was a question that came in from Sarah this morning. She says, I really wish we could lower the speed limit to 30 through all neighborhoods in the community. Oh, Any thoughts on that? Idea. I think it's a great idea. I know in the area where I live, the speed limit is 50 going around by my house. It's posted, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous. My own personal feelings is we live kind of across from a green belt, but there's so many kids in my area. So I think it's when you go through driver training, I think if you're on the main roads near homes, it's 50, but then I think you're actually supposed to do like 40 when you kind of go in between the homes. I would definitely love to see it drop down to 30, because there's no reason anybody should be doing more than that when you're driving between houses and kids. And, kids still want to play on the street. And as dangerous as it is,
kind of a rite of passage, you know, to when we were kids playing street hockey and things. You know, you see a car, you know you have to move out of the way. But if someone's barreling down your road at like 40, 50 kilometers, you don't have time to get out of the way.
Well, certainly part of the conversation your committee can have. And Heather and Ben and I were in Canmore for a week, and I'll tell you, they have crosswalks and speed bumps everywhere. And nobody can go fast. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And so it's very much a walkable community. So maybe part of the vision that you guys can begin to graft as you move forward.
Oh, most definitely. One of the biggest things that we're working on right now with Leslie, our CHIP coordinator, childhood injury prevention, is we're definitely looking at crosswalks everywhere in town right now. Some places are severely lacking in crosswalks.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Melanie. We're out of time. We could talk about this for a very long time. So
very long.
A great conversation and great information, very timely. So thank you to you and your committee for all the work that you're doing. Melanie Murrin is the Impact Youth Coordinator with Safe Communities Wood Buffalo, working towards the vision of a major collision-free, fatality-free region by 2030. It's a wonderful idea, and I think if we work together, we can make it happen. You've been listening to Impact. It is a team effort of United Way, Fuse Social, Shaw TV, Fort McMurray, YMM Magazine, and our friends here at 91.1 The Bridge.